Hello, everyone. My name is Laurie Franklin with the Central Kootenai Invasive Species Society. It's not quite 7 o'clock, so we'll just let people come into the room here. So thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for this Broomcraft Mastery webinar, where we're going to learn about invasive Scotch broom and how to responsibly transform it into Halloween decor. So my name is Laurie Frankham. If you're just joining us with the Central Kootenai Invasive Species Society, I am joining you from Roslyn, British Columbia, which is on the unceded territory of the Ktunaxa, the Silks, the Secwepemc, and the Sinixt First Nations people. So we'll just, before we dive into the topic, I'll just go over the agenda. So we'll start off with some introductions. And then we'll do some invasive species 101 with focusing on Scotch broom in particular. And then best management practices for harvesting plants for repurposing. And then Scotch broom ID, control, and disposal. And then I'll turn it over to our other guest speaker, Diana, to do some broom making. So just a little bit of housekeeping for those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom. At the bottom, if you can just stay on mute and your video off for now, just until we're done doing the first introduction. If you do have any questions that come up or comments, by all means, use the chat box. At the very end, we'll have a chance to have a discussion. And if at that point you'd like to turn your camera on and your speaker on and join the conversation, that's great. Or you can use the chat box. This webinar is being recorded, so you can revisit it or share it with friends. We'll also send everyone a follow-up email with some resources that are mentioned. And I do ask, there'll be a very, very short survey included in it. We are a nonprofit. This survey helps us improve our programming as well. It helps us with our funding applications. And one lucky person will get a Cytisus prize. So that would be really great if you could fill out the survey. Okay, so a little bit about the organization I work for. So Cytisus stands for the Central Kootenai Invasive Species Society. So we're a nonprofit in the interior of BC, and our mission is to try to mitigate the impacts of invasive species on our region and beyond. Our other guest speaker is Diana Munday. She is a wildcrafter, herbalist, community educator, and a field naturalist. She's a lifelong wildcrafter who was born and raised on Vancouver Island. And we'll introduce and meet her after my little introduction here, which will take about 10-15 minutes. Okay, so before we can start talking about invasive species, we do need to define what a native species is. So a native species is something local. So in my situation, something from BC or the Kootenai region, these species have evolved for thousands of years and serve some sort of purpose. So they live in a balanced state. So they're shelter to wildlife, their food, things like that. So here are some common ones that are native in my region that I call home. So on the flip side of that, an invasive species is an organism, so plant, animal, or a pathogen that's been introduced and it has some sort of economic, ecological, or social harm. So Scotch broom in particular, some of the impacts that it can have is it does take over rangelands and plantations, and this can definitely decrease in crop yield. So it is a food security issue. It is very, very flammable, and the buildup of dead material in dense patches can create a fire hazard. And BC, for sure, you know, wildfires are top of mind for a lot of people. So trying to, you know, that's a big safety hazard to be concerned about. The other safety issue with Scotch broom is it can obstruct driver views on roadsides. And lastly, and probably the one that I'm most passionate about, is that Scotch broom does outcompete native species. You know, for space and resources, and what happens is this negatively can affect food chains and impact rangelands and also agricultural areas. So lots of impacts because of the fact it can just outcompete our native species. So before we get into the best management practices, it is helpful to know the characteristics of an invasive plant. So again, we're going to focus on Scotch broom, but a lot of these characteristics are shared with many invasive plants. So the first one is they produce a lot of seeds. So that's a picture of some Scotch broom seed pods there. So each Scotch broom plant can produce up to 18,000 seeds per plant. So if you look at like a big infestation, so per plant, you're talking, you know, potentially, 50, 60,000 seeds per patch is being produced. The thing with these seeds is they have really, really long lasting seed banks. So again, using Scotch broom as an example, Scotch broom seeds are really unique. They are protected with a coating, and this can actually delay germination for 30 and up to 80 years. So we're looking at a really long seed bank with this invasive plant. The other characteristic of most invasive plants is they like to, they can quickly establish and they do tend to thrive on disturbed soil, and Scotch broom definitely is no different. Broom seeds germinate well in disturbed areas, and this is especially true if there's no native plants to compete with them. And the biggest reason that Scotch broom and invasive plants can do well is they lack natural predators. So Scotch broom and other invasives really don't have any natural predators to keep them under control, and this therefore allows it to spread throughout southern BC or other parts of Canada. So how do invasive species spread? Humans are definitely a big vector of spread, and there's a really long list of how they spread, but given this topic, we're just going to focus on if you're out harvesting plants for repurposing purposes like we are today to make decorations or medicine or food, there's a chance that those activities could be leading to an increase in these invasive plants. So some of those activities are disturbing soil. So I just talked about how much invasive plants love and thrive on disturbed soil. So we're out digging out plants, we're definitely disturbing soil. The other thing is if you're harvesting plants when they're in seed, keep in mind that those seeds definitely could hitchhike onto you, your clothing, your pet, your car, and you could be introducing it to a new area. So another way that it can spread is if you're out harvesting and then moving plant material from one location to another, is that if it's not properly stored, any material that's uncovered or uncontained and blowing at the back of a truck could definitely create a new infestation. And then also improper disposal. So we do see a lot of illegal dump sites, not just of, one, the picture here, but of people that dump their garden waste up a service road or in a natural park, and they think it's harmless. They think, oh, this is just going to compost, it's fine. But if there's invasive plants in there and you're introducing them, we just talked about, how quickly they can take over because of the fact they lack natural predators, produce lots of seeds, really long-lasting seed banks. So in my eyes, improper disposal is plant pollution. So the good news is because, we are doing these activities, we can also change some of our behaviors and minimize the risk of spreading invasive plants while we're doing our harvesting by following some best management practices. So I'll break them down a little bit here, but they're pretty simple things we can do when we're out foraging or collecting materials for repurposing. The first one, super simple, arrive clean, leave clean. So making sure that when you come to a site, you're not introducing anything, because like I said, invasive plants can act as hitchhikers, and as well ensuring that you're leaving clean as well. So you'll see in this picture, this is at a community weed pull that we hosted. Very simple, like we'll have these water jugs. Just bring a water jug with you to wash off any of the materials that you're using right on site. A boot brush is a great thing to throw in your pack. To ensure, again, you're not bringing any of those invasive seeds back to a new area. Storing equipment and parking your vehicles away from invasive plants is another way to keep clean. So again, surveying and where you're putting everything really does matter because, like I said, a lot of times, we can be the vector of spread if a plant ends up on our car or in our shoes or on our tools. Learning how a plant reproduces is really important. So this is the next category of spot and harvest responsibly. So if you're going out to harvest something, knowing how it reproduces is going to help you guide your behaviors. So Scotch broom, for example, it only reproduces by seed. So the springtime is a great time to go and harvest Scotch broom because we know we don't have to deal with the seeds. Knotweed, for example, in this middle picture is different. It can spread through like rhizome or just like through a small stem fragment. It does only take the 1/7 of a gram of knotweed to produce a new plant. And then you have some plants like the St. John's wort. Again, St. John's wort is a great medicinal plant that does get harvested, but knowing that it can spread through underground rhizome, above ground creepers, and also by seed. So lots of different ways that one spreads. And another one under spot and harvest responsibly is definitely identifying any invasive plants present at your site. And the reason you want to do that is, again, you don't want to park there, you don't want to store things there, but also when you're starting to do some harvesting, you definitely want to start work at the uninfected or the least infested area first before moving to a heavily infested area. And if you need assistance with plant ID, I do recommend downloading the iNaturalist app onto your phone. And again, we'll send this in the post-webinar email. It's a great app where you take a picture, click on it, and it can kind of pop up. And the other cool thing about that is some citizen science that actually can record your observations as well. So if you're someone who loves plants, iNaturalist is definitely a great thing to have on your smartphone. So the next thing with spot and harvest responsibly, as best you can to avoid areas with invasive plants in seed. For the reasons as stated that, we just don't want them hitchhiking onto us. So limiting disturbance is the next one, because invasive plants love disturbed sites. So if you're going somewhere, definitely do your best to not step on or dig out any native or desirable vegetation. So, here's native Oregon grape or the Solomon seal are ones that grow in my region. And I'll just definitely keep my eyes open and ensure that I'm leaving those ones intact. And then when you're out, just minimizing the soil disturbance as much as you can. Yes, sometimes we want, the root of a plant or something like that. So we are, creating a lot of disturbance, but just keeping in mind that if we don't have to disturb it, maybe just leave it alone. And then with a limit disturbance as well, monitoring disturbed sites, this might be a little bit more on your own private property that if you're harvesting from, or if you do have a favorite area that maybe you are trying to eradicate Scotch broom from somewhere, definitely going back and monitoring those sites is really important. And in a perfect world, we would love to see all disturbed sites get restored with either seeding or the planting of native species. The next one is transport properly the plant materials that you're harvesting. So lots of different ways to contain your plant materials. Bags are, an effective one. Totes, containers, Ziploc bags, depending on what you're using. If you are using a truck, we definitely recommend, having an enclosed trailer or a canopy or a tonneau cover, or really securing the load with a tarp so it doesn't blow at the back of your truck as you drive away. And then disposing properly. So here in my area and within the regional district of Central Kootenay and Kootenay boundary, there are actually no tipping fees to bring invasives to the landfill as long as they're in clear bags. So this is any material that you're not going to be using for repurposing. Like you just take what you need, but there's some extra materials you do need to just dispose of it properly. You can simply also just place it in your household garbage in any sort of contained bag. With large quantities of Scotch broom, we use something called the burrito method, where we line the back of our truck, secure it tightly. And for something like this, you do have to contact usually the landfill in advance to get permission, or just getting the heads up that you're bringing a large load of invasives. So I'm going to keep in mind there are some plants that only spread by seed that can be left on the site to compost if they're harvested before they go to flower or to seed. So that's why knowing how a plant reproduces is important, because it ties into how you're going to dispose of it. So you really want to avoid putting any invasive plant parts in your own backyard compost. Lastly, burning isn't really an effective disposal method. Some species seeds are still viable after a fire. So if you are using this method, making sure that you are monitoring the site, but we don't recommend it as a disposal method. So this next one isn't necessarily a responsible harvesting best management practice. It's more for anyone out there who enjoys gardening. Scotch broom got introduced through the whole horticulture industry. It's quite an attractive plant, so I can understand why people would want to grow it. And horticulture is a really big way that we're still seeing invasive species get introduced or spread around. So we really want folks to know what they grow, and there are two great resources out there to help you with that. There's a provincial-wide one called PlantWise, which essentially highlights the top 26 invasive plants and Scotch brooms on that list that are still either seen for sale in greenhouses or people are trading amongst them, and it gives you really great alternatives. Locally, we have something here called the Eco Garden Project. There's a great plant list that either native or non-invasive cultivars that are climate smart, water smart, fire smart. They're non-invasive, attract birds, pollinators, and they're all on this really great list that we have on our website. And again, we'll email that out to you. The next one is spotting and reporting. So if you spot a new patch of Scotch broom in your area or other invasives, definitely reporting it is the best way forward. So if you're in our region here in the Central Kootenay, there's 3 different ways you can report it to us. In BC, there's the Report Invasives app that you can download on your phone, take a picture, send that report in. And again, that iNaturalist app is a great app that you can include on your iPhone to help you with identification. Okay, so that's our invasive species 101 and the best management practices. I'm just going to move on to just honing in on a little bit of education around Scotch broom itself. So what does Scotch broom look like? Identification tip. So it's a pretty recognizable plant. It's a woody shrub that stands 1 to 3 meters tall. The seeds are green pea pods that turn brown when seeds have finished forming. And lastly, they do have these quite attractive flowers on them that are yellow and pea-like. And there are times there might be a small yellow marking in the middle of it, but quite an evergreen, attractive woody shrub. So treatment. So when you're going out, you might just be taking a couple of pieces of broom to upcycle to one of the brooms that Diana is going to show you, or you might be going out and trying to manage brooms. So I'm going to kind of cover just like managing it, and then you can decide what to do with upcycling that material afterwards. So the big thing to remember when managing Scotch broom or dealing with Scotch broom is minimizing soil disturbance, because of the long viability of those seeds and because of the fact when you disturb the soil, you are increasing the chance of germination happening. So you can hand pull, but only really, really young plants can come out from the ground. So when I say young plants or size, think about a diameter of a pencil. So like no bigger than this. Again, because we want to limit that soil disturbance. So a really good tip is, when the soil is moist, I'm sure anyone who's gone and weeded their garden knows it's a way easier to do after a rainfall, to get those plants out of the ground. And once you are pulling them out, to just replace any of those divots. Again, we're just trying to minimize that soil disturbance. Cutting. So this is the most popular way that we deal with Scotch broom in our region, because you're typically dealing with bigger patches. So you essentially just want to take a really good set of clippers, handsaw, and you can cut plants as low to the ground as possible using a lopper or saw. Cutting in early spring is best, again, because you're just not dealing with those seeds. So if you're going out to cut broom right now to make these brooms, just ensure that you're removing all of those seed pods from the plant before you're transporting it. Or if you are going to transport it, contain it, bring it home, and all those seed pods, make sure they end up in the garbage so you're not spreading it to your own property. But spring would be the best time, because then you don't have to worry about the seeds. So I said this, cut before it goes to seed. The other thing to keep in mind is when you're cutting it, especially on like any public land, you want to ensure you're trying to make it as flat as possible. We just don't want to leave any sort of sharp hazards someone could potentially trip or hurt themselves on. And again, monitoring these sites is really, really important because of that long viability. I've seen myself cutting broom over a period of time definitely works, and then out competing with native species. I've had some really successful broom sites where eradication has happened in my region with this treatment. Mowing and burning, people ask about these methods. Neither one is recommended. I'll leave it as simple as that. They're just not an effective way to deal with Scotch broom. And if you mow or burn, you can't repurpose it. So nothing you'd want to do with those 2 control methods. So disposal. So you've cut down the broom, you've pulled it, now you have all this plant material. What do you do? So in the spring, when there's no seeds present, is a little bit easier to deal with. The one thing to keep in mind with disposal is Scotch, like I mentioned earlier, it is a really big fire hazard. So just keeping in mind that leaving any dead Scotch broom on site could potentially increase the risk of fire, because you're adding fuel to the area. So just keep that in mind with disposal. So if seeds aren't present, small volumes can be left on site, scattered or mulched. If you're dealing with really, really big volumes, it can be chipped off site or into an existing Scotch broom impacted area. And then large unshipped volumes should be bagged, tarped, and brought to the landfill. And that's more so because of the fire hazard, not because it's going to reproduce or anything like that. So just look at your site. And if it's, it's not going to be a fire hazard, you're not concerned about fire there, then you can leave it on site. So if seeds are present, you want to transport plant parts on tarps or thick plastic bags to an appropriate disposal site or landfill. So when disposing of large volumes, like I said before, about contacting the landfill in advance to confirm it's okay to dump it. And then deep burial definitely is required, and never put Scotch broom in your own personal compost. So one little thing to highlight, if you have a Scotch broom site in your area and you live in the Kootenay region, definitely check out our Broom Buster program, a community-driven program where we get a group of volunteers together to go and do a broom bash, we call it, where we essentially get together and just try to, you know, hit a broom as hard as you can with a bunch of loppers. Lots of reasons to join, you know, the program. And again, we'll send you some information on this after the webinar. So a big thank you to our funders. That concludes my little chat before I hand it over to Diana. So Columbia Basin Trust and the government of BC, thank you for funding the Cytisus education program so that we can offer fun webinars like this. So I'm going to turn it over to Diana Munday, who is going to show us how to now upcycle this Scotch broom that we responsibly harvested. So Diana, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Lori, for all that information. It's really important if you're going to engage in the environment, you need to know the risk and how you're impacting the environment. I know Lori had gone over that I'm a wildcrafter, I'm a herbalist. I'm also a Langley field naturalist. Now I am doing our webinar here in the Langley Environmental Partners Society office, which is sort of a cousin to the Central Kootenays Invasive Species Society. So there's one big network in British Columbia, and as a Langley field naturalist, we partner with the LEPs, as we call them, and we work in conjunction in regards to education, in regards to our environment. And one of the things is conservation. And one of the highlights that I specialize in as a herbalist is invasive plants. It would be remiss for me to educate others to use invasive plants without doing so responsibly. And that's where people like Lori, who do this so professionally with such great education and background, and to be honest, with the field work that they do, it just is unbelievable. I mean, the Broom Busters, it sounds really good. It's hard work, and we appreciate what you do. So I'm going to start off my segment of the this broom making course and just doing a statement of land acknowledgement. Here, LEPS, I'm from Langley, BC. I wanted everyone to know this is being held on the unceded territory of the Kwantlen, Matski, Semiahmoo, Katzie, Tsleil-Waututh, and I'm missing one. I'm sorry, I apologize who I'm missing, but I want to make sure that's recognized. We're fortunate enough to live upon this land and work. As a herbalist, it's really important for me to educate people who I engage with, that they understand the impact. Yes, we're making a broom, but we're also impacting the environment. When I'm collecting materials, make room, this is part of it. I've learned myself how to harvest broom with all those wonderful tips that Lori shared. And when I take others, I go out and educate. Again, there's lots of opportunity, no matter what part of BC or even Canada-wide, where you can join forces with others in order to harvest materials, not just broom itself, but others. And you can have all the plant pulls you want, all the material you could possibly want. I should also let you know, I'm most active on Instagram. My Instagram handle is wildcrafted herbals. I have lived here in Langley for about 30 years. I started off volunteering with the LEPS organization by doing invasive plant pulls and thinking to myself, what are we doing with all these plants? And that piqued my interest in regards to becoming a herbalist. So that's enough about me. What I want to get to is the brooms. Just so you know, while I'm doing this, you are more than welcome to throw some questions in there. I think Lori is going to be letting me know if I miss something or if you have a question that pops up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go over the history of the broom and then we're going to make one. I know you're not here with me, but because you can see I've got the background all spookified. The Langley Environmental Partners Society is doing a pumpkin walk this Saturday. Entry is by food donation to the food bank. If you want to come out, it's at the Derrick Doubleday Arboretum, right off the Fraser Highway. These are what all these pumpkins are for, so come on by if you're available. So back to the brooms. So we're talking about brooms. What does broom mean? Broom comes from the English word besom, and besoms is also bosom, which are associated with women. Brooms and broomsticks are very much tied to women because they traditionally did the bulk of the housework. It also comes from the Old English word of besema. There's many theories to why witches became associated with riding brooms. I will tell you the majority of it is not that exciting. For the most part, a broom was a place where a woman could hide things, whether it be salve, jewels, little precious things they didn't want to share or they wanted to keep secret. Also, this idea of people running around with brooms in the fields and dancing around with brooms, they were probably on some sort of psychedelics just to get away from the marginalization of their lives. And these people were very, put upon and marginalized, and this was maybe just a bit of fun for them. So that's where it ties back into. But they just, they use that as just to get away from the bit of the misery of their lives. They would decorate it how they want, or they wouldn't. They would just keep it plain and simple. For the most part, these brooms were entirely probably practical, with just a few things hidden in there just to keep on the little sly. Now, the other thing where brooms are used for is in regards to a ritual, in regards to a wedding. There's a ritual known as jumping the broom. Jumping the broom was actually a way of officiating a marriage. This was done primarily for people who were marginalized in a lot of the areas of the world. And there was gypsies, I believe there's some African American customs, and basically it was marginalized people that weren't allowed to marry. So by jumping the broom, that signaled that the couple was officially married. Now, culturally, a lot of people will still go ahead and jump the broom as to honor their ancestors. And people make their brooms. Some people make them very elaborate, using crystals and all these flowers, and they keep that as a memento of their wedding, sort of like people keeping a piece of wedding cake stuffed away to have on their anniversary, same sort of thing. But they mainly use it in honor, to honor their ancestors today. And then if you go into Etsy, there's people who make them. There's people that make their own. Some people make very elaborate brooms. Some people make some very simple brooms. I tend to make brooms that are quite simple and sort of natural. Everyone has their own way of making a broom. So now, having all said that, you've got the history. I'm going to get up and I'm just going to move my camera a little bit, and I'm going to show you how I make a broom. I know this is sort of like 3D, and I'm sorry if I go out of camera rate while I adjust this chair, pardon me. Okay, so for materials, I hope everyone can see me. I'm just going to adjust my camera a little tiny bit. All right, can everyone hear me okay? I hope that's all right. We've got some materials. So I would highly suggest you use gloves. You may or may not be allergic to it. Not the best time to try. Just get familiar with the plant, and you can go from there. When I'm pulling it, that's when I wear gloves. I also have clippers. I also have scissors. Now, I also found a really cool stick, if everyone can see that. This is a pretty witchy stick, and you can make these brooms as big or as little as you want. I will show you some examples here. I don't know if anyone's seen any of the posts that I've made for Cytisus in regards to these. This is actually a really small one. I usually do a really big one, but this is like a proper whisk. This one's just for decorative, and I'm making this for someone. And you can see it's very simple. I've just got some cedar here. This is completely plain, and I've just tied it with some jute. This is an example of a broom where I'll make that I've made for someone's business or their altar or in their garden. But you can see by the size of it, I've made brooms that are probably 8 feet tall. So the sky's the limit. The key is to binding it tight and responsibly harvesting and just making it whatever you want. So I'm just going to set this aside. Okay. So first things first. All this broom that I have here has been picked responsibly. I've also removed all the seeds and I've thrown them in the garbage. And now I've got my broom. I've got my cool, funky stick. You can have 2 hands are better than one, a second set of hands. I'm going to use this as the outer handle. You just need to pick which part of the handle you want to show, and you can use, you can use it from your yard. What I like to do is after there's a windstorm, I'm out there finding sticks and branches off the road, carefully picking some sticks, and then I dry them out and I bring them to workshops just like this. I've actually got a whole basket back here. Maybe you can see where I picked up and I polished up. I was also gifted some sticks by someone who thought it was really cool that we're doing a workshop like this. And so I'm just going to figure out how I want to adjust this to my broom. You can make it very thick. You can make it very thin. Yeah, so this is what I think I want. I'm just going to make it like this. Now the next step, this is the fun part. This is where a second set of hands comes in early. And sometimes you can even put an elastic band on to help you. And here, I'm just going to bit someone there. All right, welcome. So basically, I'm going to leave a string of tarp, and I use this for hanging, and I'm going to start winding. And you have to be very firm when you start winding the broom onto the stick, because it's going to dry out. It's not going to dry out a lot, but things will start falling out like I showed you with that big broom. So I'm just going to keep winding and winding and winding. Get the basis of keeping it tight. Sometimes the rope will break, that's okay, but as you can see, it's even starting. You can see up there, I'm sorry, you can see up there, it's starting to take shape here. And I've got this. And you can trim it at the top, you can make it look whatever you want. And I just get the basis of it becoming a broom before I start adding decoration. So there we go. So I've bound it about, I don't know, about 6 or 7 times. If you can see that, sorry. Doing my best here to do it on the camera for you. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some other things. So, since it's Halloween, I thought I'd add some pumpkins. So, this is where the scissors come in handy. So, I'm just going to pop this up like this. And I'm actually, you can just sort of push this in. Whoop, that broke, excuse me. You can just push it inside the other sticks, and then you're going to bind it to keep it stuck in there. And again, you can, here, I'm going to cut this off a little bit, excuse me. You can make this as decorative or as plain as you want. I'm just trying to be very Halloween-y. I tend to make very natural ones, but just a pop of color. Or if that doesn't, sorry, if this doesn't, do it for you, another option would be flowers. I see a lot of people who make the wedding brooms with flowers, and because they're meant for long term, they usually use decorative flowers, and they keep for a long time. Or if you would like, I found these beautiful leaves. Sorry, I found these beautiful leaves. You could use some leaves to tack it on like that. Sorry. Give me a moment. And I think I'm going to go with a natural approach, I think, with a little bit of pumpkin in there. So I think I'm going to put some leaves on first. Sorry, I'm going to put some leaves on, and then I'm going to add that yellow pumpkin or orange pumpkin just to give it a bit of a natural feel. Let's take a look here. While I am doing that, is there any questions in the chat that maybe Lori could read out to me in regards to making a broom? Please speak now. Please go ahead.
There was a question from Willow. Wondering, is a Scotch broom soft enough to bend back on itself, or will it snap?
You know what? That's a great question, because I've seen people do that with corn brooms. I actually met the people in the Kootenays as well in Granville Island about folding it over. I haven't gotten there. You know what? It, from my experience, I think I, I don't know. I'll tell you what, try it and see what happens. I'm curious to see. I want to actually get myself a corn broom puller. That's not the proper name, but I'm just saying that's what it's called. You could definitely try it. I think if you had enough um, binding strength to keep it over, I think if you did it while it was moist and did it strong enough, I think it would hold. Great
Yeah,
question.
I would think in the spring it would be better. Like it gets really dry and brittle
You know what?
in the
I
fall.
100% think so. I think in the
Yeah.
spring would be best because that's when it's most supple, and that's when it has the most amount of oils from what I've researched. And definitely, excuse me while I grab something here. Is there any other questions?
So feel you can turn your speaker on if you want, or feel free to type in the chat. I guess I have a question because on that picture that you sent in, you actually had it hanging up on a wall. So how do you secure it to a wall? Do you have any tips for that?
You see this little tail that I started off with? That's
Okay,
the trick.
there you go.
That's the trick. Yeah, I know. You know what? I'm not very good at tying bows, but I'm very good at hanging things on walls, I guess. But that's what and that's the easiest way. And it's being twisted by and supported by all the rest of these of all the bindings, I guess you could say, so it works perfectly. You can basically tie it in a bow. I'll actually here, maybe I'll show you this if this is better. If you could see, there's actually a bow at the end. I've done a bow at the end of it. I've secured it with a different type of twine, but basically, this is basically a hanging sort of, you can put this on the wall. In my experience, after about 3 or 4 months, it'll start going black. By next Halloween, your broom's going to be black, and some people really love it. Some people spray paint it too. Some people color it. I don't have time for that. I also again, I try and keep things as natural as possible, but those brooms are absolutely beautiful. Like I said, if you look into the wedding brooms, it's more for altar brooms that I've seen where people have used colors on the actual material, or they've dipped the leaves into some paint, which was kind of cool, and just let it drip dry, and then they had this sort of like this fade going down, which I thought was kind of cool. So yeah, that's just an idea. I mean, the sky is the limit. People are very clever. I'm just going to grab some cedar. So I have cedar trees on my property, so this is responsibly harvest, and I'm just going to add that to my broom. And is there any other questions there?
Yeah, there was another question in the
If
chat
not, I'm gonna.
box. Yep, in the chat box,
Okay.
someone else was asking how you remove the seeds.
Oh, by hand.
It's
Many
kind
hands
of,
make
yeah.
light work. This
Yeah.
this is it. There's no way about it. Lori and I actually did a workshop for the Canadian Herb Conference in oh my goodness, I'm blanking out. What was the name of that
Salmo.
lovely place?
Salmo.
It was in the thank you, Selmo in the Coonies, and they showed up with this big broom burrito in the back of that truck. I think that picture in your presentation might have been the broom burrito that you brought to the conference. Anyway, it was massive, and we all, that was part of the actual workshop for them having to understand how important that was. I don't know if you covered it or not, but I have read, and please, you're the expert, Lori. What is the timeline, like the half-life, I guess you could say, of a Scotch broom seed? I have read anywhere to 30 to 90 years. I'm going to say it's going to be 40 just to be reasonable, but do you have any idea on the half-life of seeds and when they can be still viable?
Yeah, they have a really, really long seed bank. So you're right, anywhere between 30 to 80 years.
That's
Because of, and again, and that's when they thrive, when it's disturbed soil with no native vegetation. Where I have gone with community groups to cut down large volumes of broom every year we go back, there's less and less and less, and we're seeing the native species sort of move in and with the less disturbance. So it's not like you're gonna be out cutting broom for 80 years, but there is the chance of them staying viable for that long. So one of the longer like that's a characteristic of an invasive plant, why they can do so well, and is that they have these really long lasting seed banks. So for sure, like harvesting this time of year, I can't stress enough how important it is to remove those seeds.
100%.
Yeah, and really, if you're just making a broom, you don't need that much volume, right? Like you're talking,
no,
like
this broom that I'm making right now, this is like a little broom to me, or a medium size. Like this you could put in your house, I guess, if you wanted. I mean, this was basically half of a plant that was about this tall, and I'm 5'2", right? And again, you know, that's not a lot, but if you're going to be cutting, part of that responsibility of taking is actually making sure that you're doing it responsibly. Nothing is free in regards to the environment as far as I'm concerned, and that's the credo that's the hill I will die on, because I don't want to be responsible for causing, you know, an imbalance in the ecosystem. And as a herbalist, you know, one in regards to looking after people's health, I'm also responsible being a steward of the environment, because that's who I work with. I have a responsibility. So getting back to your question in regards to the seeds, honestly, you can make a party out of it. I actually had a gathering, was it 3 weeks ago, and that was it. We all had to de-seed, and it went really, really fun. And while we were doing that, I was telling them about how like the seed they'll spiral and they'll just pop. It's actually so interesting, and that's just part of the plant's resilience, and that's why it's so important for you to be careful in regards to the harvesting of it, because these plants are really, they want to survive. They've come over here and they're succeeding for a reason. But it's just so interesting to see the resilience. And you know, back in Scotland, the Scotch broom was on their part of their heraldry, and that's because they used to put this, you know, in battle because it was so strong. And broom is strong. Like you go anywhere, it looks like it's easy to deal with. It's not. It's not easy to deal with. Its tenacity is unmatched, and that's why I think a lot of people are sort of drawn to broom. It, first of all, it looks really cool. It dries black, so it's like the ultimate goth accessory for your altar. And I'm not mocking that. I'm just saying it is really cool looking. But you know, you see, even when it's dry, it's still quite strong. I have a broom down in my sewing room. It must be 6 years old now, and it's uh it's still going strong. If my cat got near, it would probably destroy it, because I've got decorations on it that might go. I've got cedar on there, but for the most part, it's still going strong. Yeah.
okay. So we have another question here in the chat box. Sorry, I just will get to it. Just someone's asking about what to do with the seeds, what remove. So I'm happy to answer that. Put them in the garbage.
Please.
Like either in the garbage, or if you do it on site. I mean, you can leave it, but yeah, one less Scotch broom seed out there in the seed bank, in my opinion, is the best one. So definitely never in your compost, directly in your garbage. Deep burial at landfill is the best place for them. Yeah. So that answers your question. Sorry, what were you gonna say there, Diana?
Point out that sleep rooms first, they also can harm them. You can use beads as you can hang it off the actual tag, and that's kind of cool looking. Some people will put stones and crystals. You will have to put a glue gun. Again, I try to weave them in there somehow. I'll make a little cradle with the twine. I really don't like using glue. And if it falls out, it falls out. I try and make it as organic, and there's no diss to someone who makes to want it as glam as possible. If you want to bedazzle it, do it your way. You know, when, you know, Lori can attest to this, when we did our broom workshop, everyone made a broom that reflected them. It's so cool to see, because your personality will come out. Now this one, I think I'm almost done. I've added a few things. And again, I like to make it plain. I'm actually going to tie it off here. You'll have to excuse me. I usually don't work with pumpkins. I'm doing my best to make it. I'm struggling a little bit. This isn't my perfect design, but I wanted to make it like kind of Halloweeny, and I couldn't find any bats. I had this big idea to make them out of corn husks, but I just ran out of time. So right now I'm at the point where I want to finish tying it up. Okay, so if you can see, I'm gonna let the fronds be natural. You can cut them straight off. This is more of a decor broom. This is something I hang on my door to scare away people knocking at the door selling vacuum cleaners. Okay, I'm kidding. They don't do that anymore. But it is quite funny because sometimes my neighbors are like, "Oh, there she is again, making brooms," and I'm out on my just because where my doorstep is, it's the perfect height to be like a place to lean on. I can wind my brooms, and they're like, "There she goes again." So now I'm gonna tie off my broom, and I'll show you where I'm at. Excuse me. And it's as simple as tying a bow. I kid you not. I try and make it as tight as possible. And this is where, again, a second set of hands comes in. I'm going to take my handy dandy scissors. Excuse me. And basically, and this is where you can hang beads off of, you can hang flowers off of, and you can even put this in your garden. Some people like to put that on their garden gate. And basically, it's done. So, but look at the cool handle on this. Like, this is pretty cool. I hope everyone can see that. Sorry, this background is kind of interesting, but the broom is now done. Now, in regards to the use of the broom, now there are some religions that will use this as a cleansing ritual. The making of the broom, of an introduction of a new broom, or when they go into a new space. So the metaphor of the broom is supposedly to be sweeping away of the old and allowing the space of the new clean energy. There are rituals to ward off any ill will coming towards your house. So basically, you would hold your broom and you would put it, you can use clockwise, the counterclockwise, do what works for you. And this is making a circle with your broom and blessing your space with nature. And it's as simple as that. So again, the broom making is completely up to what you like. But I will tell you that if you want broom, I would highly suggest that you contact your closest environmental agency out in the Kootenays or here in Langley. You can message me. I'm sure Lori will be the same. We can put you in the direct. You can come out with us and we'll teach you, and we can harvest it together. But this is such an easy thing to do, and it's super cool for Halloween. Let's face it. Is there any questions?
Yeah, we have about a little over 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions for Diana or myself, now's the time. We can also finish early. Someone just put something interesting in the chat box about,
Okay.
it looks like, brooms have lots of different, fables and history. And they said that they recently heard that you put a broom outside your home. It's an invite for hobos to knock on your door for a free meal. So it's an invitation, to someone who might be looking for, a hot meal that hasn't had one in a while. So that's kind of another neat little association with a broom, and some symbolism there. So I know, Dan, I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed the fact that you can whip up a craft in like 15 minutes and talk at the same time and give us some information about the history and your passion and your dedication to, understanding that invasives are an issue, but that we can, go out and harvest them, but then purpose it for something kind of neat like this. So it's great that you were able to come out and be our guest speaker tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. And someone put another good point here. They said they actually use iNaturalist to find where Scotch broom grows near them. So that's exactly right. So those of you aren't familiar with iNaturalist, when you upload one of your observation, you're a little dot on a map and you can go and find. And sadly, in the West Kootenays here, there's no shortage of Scotch brooms. So definitely, if you want to go out and use some of these tips that we use to make your own decor, if you have someone, maybe a cool wedding gift. I know down the road we would do like a spring wedding broom making, but just it was so fitting with Halloween just around the corner, of using something natural. But hey, one less Scotch broom plant out there, in my opinion, is you know, better than not being there. So any little bit helps, and we're trying to get more people involved in that. So we have this Broom Busters program in our area, and just really trying to engage folks that, you know, if they want to come out and actually help reduce Scotch broom in their own communities. So yeah, does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, it looks like people are just saying thank you. It's a cool idea, and they're gonna keep their eyes peeled. And yeah, just like I said, this is gonna be recorded, so definitely check your inbox for you know, the upcoming. There's gonna be like this recording's gonna be there, some resources that we talked about. If you have any other invasive questions and you are in the Central Kootenay region, definitely reach out to us. We have a wealth of information on our website. You can email us. We definitely are here to help landowners and people who want to be involved. We are just one of 18 invasive species organizations across BC, but there's some in Alberta, Ontario, across the country. So if you're joining us outside of BC, definitely reach out to your local invasive species society, because invasive species are something tangible we can actually do something about. We can take some action on. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm just gonna call out one more call for any questions out there. I'll just double check the chat box before I let people go, but it looks like the chat box is done. People are just saying thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us. Looks like there's no other questions. So I think we will leave it there. Diana, any last words before we let you go and fly away there on your broom?
No, I'd like to thank Lori and the CCAS for inviting me out, and thank you to the sponsors. And it was great for everyone to meet everyone. Take care.
Okay. Happy Halloween, everyone. Hope you get lots of candy. Trick or treat. Take care. Bye-bye.